All right, so today we are going deep on something that feels like it's straight out of science fiction.
Oh yeah, definitely sci-fi, but also like becoming very real very quickly.
Yeah, I'm talking about digital twins.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Like, imagine having a virtual, personalized version of yourself.
Like a copy, but in the computer.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just like a fun gimmick. We're talking about using this tech, these digital twins, to help people manage chronic conditions like diabetes.
Right, so it's like a virtual you, but specifically focused on health, helping you understand how your body works and stuff.
Absolutely. It's almost like a health simulator, but like hyper-personalized to you, predicting how your body might react to treatments or even just lifestyle changes.
Okay, that is seriously cool. And like, how far along are we with this? Is this still just an idea, or is there actual research happening on
Oh
this?
no, we are way past just the idea stage. Digital twins are being actively researched and developed, especially when it comes to metabolic diseases, with a huge focus on diabetes.
So like, real science, real data, real potential to help people.
Exactly. And we've got a whole stack of research papers and even a technical talk to dive into today.
All right, let's get into it.
Okay, so first up, we have this paper, Digital Twins and Artificial Intelligence in Metabolic Disease Research. It's by Mosquero Lopez and Jacobs, and it gives a really great overview of the whole field.
Sounds like a good starting point.
Yeah, and then we'll look at this review on food as medicine programs.
Mhm.
It talks about how nutrition is being integrated into healthcare, which is super relevant to this whole digital twin thing.
I'm all about the food as medicine approach, so I'm interested to hear about that.
Yeah, and then we've got a deep dive from Pei and his team on multimodal digital phenotyping in Hispanic Latino adults. That's a group that's at higher risk for type 2 diabetes.
Right, and understanding those risk factors is key.
Totally. And then we'll check out what Sarani Rad and her colleagues have to say about a patient-centric knowledge graph approach. Basically, it's their framework for building these digital twins specifically for personalized diabetes care.
Okay, starting to see how this all connects.
And last but not least, we'll touch on a technical talk from the Rice Ken Kennedy Institute. It's by Marin and Crespo. And they get really into the nitty-gritty of building a digital twin for type 1 diabetes.
All right, so we've got type 1, type 2, nutrition, the whole shebang. This is going to be a comprehensive deep dive for sure.
Totally. And what's so transformative about all of this is that we're moving away from those one-size-fits-all recommendations for managing diabetes.
Hmm.
The generic guidelines that don't always work for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's different, so why should we expect the same advice to work for everyone?
Exactly. Digital twins could allow us to create hyper-personalized strategies, tailored to each person's unique health profile and how their body actually responds to things.
Okay, so less guesswork, more precision.
Exactly. So our mission today is to break down all of these cutting-edge developments and really figure out what they could mean for anyone navigating life with diabetes, whether it's you or someone you know.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, so let's start with the basics, right? What exactly is a digital twin when we're talking about healthcare? I mean, it's more than just a copy of your medical records.
Oh, definitely more than just a static record. It's not just a snapshot of your past.
Right, it's got to be more dynamic than that.
Exactly. In healthcare, a digital twin is this, like living, evolving virtual representation of you. So, yeah, it includes your medical history, but also your lifestyle habits, your diet, your activity levels.
Okay, so it's like taking all that data we're always collecting from our phones or smartwatches and actually putting it to good use.
Precisely. And it even includes real-time data streaming from wearable sensors.
Oh, wow, so it's constantly updating.
Yep, constantly learning and adapting. The goal is to create this computer model that can simulate how your body actually works. And then the really cool part is that it can predict how your health might change based on different things you do or treatments you might receive.
So it's like having a crystal ball, but for your health, all based on real data.
Kind of, yeah. And it's not just about predicting the future, it's about giving you more control over your health, allowing you to make more informed decisions.
That makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
Now, Mosquero Lopez and Jacobs, in their paper, they highlight certain characteristics that make a digital twin effective for managing metabolic diseases.
Oh, yeah, they lay out a good framework. They actually focus on three main points.
Okay, what are those?
First, the digital twin has got to be personalized. I mean, that's the whole point, right? It has to be built around your specific data, your unique situation.
Right, not just based on some average person.
Exactly. Second, it needs to be dynamic. Like we were saying before, it can't just be a static snapshot. It has to constantly update as new information comes in, reflecting the changes that are always happening in your body.
So it's like a living, breathing model, always adapting.
Exactly. And third, it needs to be predictive. It should be able to forecast what might happen to your health in the future based on the data it's collected and the simulations it's run.
Okay, so it's not just about understanding where you are now. It's about anticipating where you might be headed and making adjustments along the way.
Exactly. And that's so powerful for managing chronic conditions like diabetes, where there are so many factors at play.
Now, one thing that struck me was that all of our sources today, they all talk about diabetes. Why is that? What makes diabetes such a good fit for digital twin technology?
Well, diabetes, both type 1 and type 2, it's a really tricky condition to manage. Blood sugar levels can fluctuate so much depending on what you eat, how active you are, stress levels, medications.
Right, so many variables.
Exactly. And that's where a tool like a digital twin can be so valuable. It can take all of those factors into account and help you make more informed decisions about how to manage your blood sugar effectively.
So it's like having a personalized guide helping you navigate all those complexities.
Absolutely. And the more data it has, the better it can personalize those recommendations,
Yeah.
making them truly tailored to your unique needs.
That's where this idea of multimodal digital phenotyping comes in, right?
Yeah.
Pei and his colleagues talk about that in their study.
Oh, yeah, that's a cool concept. Basically, it's about using multiple digital health technologies at the same time to get this really rich, detailed picture of a person's health and behavior.
So like instead of just relying on one data source, you're pulling information from multiple places.
Exactly. So for diabetes, this might mean wearing a continuous glucose monitor, those little devices that track your blood sugar in real time,
Right, I've seen those.
and also using an activity tracker to monitor your movement and exercise.
Like a Fitbit or something.
Yeah, exactly. And then also using an app to log your meals, so you're tracking what you're eating and when.
So it's like building this comprehensive data set, capturing all these different aspects of your life that can impact your blood sugar.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so powerful for creating accurate digital twins. You're not just looking at isolated pieces of information, you're seeing the whole picture.
And their study specifically focused on Hispanic Latino adults, right?
That's right. They wanted to look at a population that's at a higher risk for type 2 diabetes to see how these technologies could help with prevention and management.
So what did they actually track in this study, and what were some of their key findings?
Okay, so they had 36 participants, and they all wore a continuous glucose monitor for 2 weeks straight. They also wore an actigraph, which is a type of activity monitor, and they used the MyFitnessPal app to log all of their meals.
Wow, that's a lot of data.
It is. And from all of that information, they were able to develop what they call digital biomarkers.
Digital biomarkers, what are those?
Basically, they're like quantifiable measurements, but instead of coming from a blood test or something, they come from all this digital data. They represent different aspects of the participants' diet, activity levels, and how their glucose responded to different things.
So it's like using data to create a digital fingerprint of your metabolic health.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And one of the really cool things they did was develop this digital biomarker for meal events.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that.
So they basically analyzed the glucose response after each meal, how much your blood sugar goes up and how long it stays elevated after you eat. They had this measure called MGR3H, which basically quantifies that response.
Okay, so they could see how different meals affected each person's blood sugar.
Exactly. And then they did something really clever. They looked at the average MGR3H for each person across all their meals and compared it to their HbA1c level.
HbA1c, that's the long-term blood sugar marker, right?
Yeah, exactly. It gives you an average of your blood sugar levels over the past 2 to 3 months. And what they found was that there was a correlation between a person's average MGR3H and their HbA1c level.
So basically, if your blood sugar spikes a lot after meals, your overall HbA1c is likely to be higher.
Precisely. And then they use this relationship to classify individual meals as either normal or elevated.
So like some meals caused a big spike in blood sugar, those were elevated, and others didn't, those were normal.
Yeah, exactly. And they found that the more elevated meal events a person had in a day, the worse their overall blood sugar control was. They had lower time in range, meaning their blood sugar spent less time within the target range.
Makes sense. If you're constantly having those big spikes, it's going to be harder to keep your blood sugar stable overall.
Right. And that's why this kind of individual meal analysis could be so important. It could help people pinpoint exactly which meals are causing problems and then make adjustments.
Yeah, were there any other interesting findings from that study? Anything that people could put into practice right away?
Oh, definitely. They found that if people just got up and moved a little bit after a meal, like just 1,000 extra steps, it actually made a significant difference.
Really? Just 1,000 steps.
Yeah, it reduced their glucose response to the meal and made it less likely to be classified as elevated.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So simple, but so effective.
Exactly. It just shows that even small changes in behavior can have a big impact on your blood sugar.
Okay, so we've talked about multimodal digital phenotyping, capturing all this detailed data. Now, how do we take all that information and actually build a functional digital twin?
Well, that's where Sarani Rad and her team come in with their research on patient-centric knowledge graphs.
Knowledge graphs. Okay,
Yeah.
break that down for me.
So a knowledge graph is basically a really smart way to organize information. It's like a map that connects different pieces of data together, showing how they relate to each other.
Okay, I'm starting to see the picture.
So instead of just having all this data scattered around in different places, a knowledge graph creates structure and connections. It's like a web of information.
And in this case, it's a web of information about your health.
Exactly. They call it a personal health knowledge graph, or PHKG. And it can pull in data from all sorts of places, your electronic health records, your wearable devices, those lifestyle apps we were talking about.
So it's like creating this central hub for all your health data.
Yeah, exactly. And they designed it to follow healthcare data standards like HL7.
HL7.
It stands for Health Level 7, and it's basically like a universal language for health data.
Okay, so it makes sure that all the different systems can talk to each other.
Exactly. So your wearable device can send data to your knowledge graph, which can then share it with your doctor's office or your digital twin. It makes the whole system more seamless and integrated.
Got it. So this knowledge graph becomes like the foundation upon which the digital twin is built.
Exactly. It gives the digital twin access to all this rich interconnected data, which is what allows it to make those personalized predictions and recommendations.
Okay, so they actually demonstrated how this knowledge graph approach could be used in practice.
They did. They created a proof of concept digital twin that could do some pretty amazing things.
Like what?
Well, for starters, it could predict future glucose levels. So it could actually anticipate changes in your blood sugar before they even happen, which is huge for managing diabetes.
Wow, that's like next level proactive care.
Right. And it could also help optimize insulin dosages so people taking insulin could get the right amount at the right time.
That's so important, especially for people with type 1 diabetes who rely on insulin to survive.
Absolutely. And it could also generate personalized lifestyle recommendations, like tailored diet plans that take into account your individual metabolic responses.
Okay, so this is where the food as medicine idea really comes into play.
Exactly. And on top of all that, it could visualize your health data in a way that's easy to understand, both for you and for your doctor.
So it's not just about collecting data, it's about making that data useful and actionable.
Exactly. It's about empowering people to take control of their health.
Now, we've talked a lot about type 2 diabetes, but type 1 is a whole different ballgame, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that's where the work of Marin and Crespo at Rice University comes in.
Their technical talk was specifically focused on creating a digital twin for people with type 1 diabetes. What makes that so challenging?
Well, the main difference with type 1 is that the body doesn't produce its own insulin.
Right, their immune system attacks the cells that make insulin.
Exactly. So people with type 1 have to rely on external insulin, either through injections or an insulin pump.
And getting that dosage right is crucial.
Right. Absolutely. It's a constant balancing act, and mistakes can be really dangerous.
So how did Marin and Crespo approach this challenge?
They did something really innovative. They combined a very detailed physiological model of glucose metabolism with advanced deep learning techniques.
Okay, unpack that for me. What do you mean by a physiological model?
So it's basically a mathematical model that simulates how glucose is processed in the body. It takes into account all the different factors that can affect blood sugar, like food intake, activity levels, and of course, insulin.
So it's based on our understanding of how the body actually works.
Exactly. And these models are incredibly useful, but they're not always perfect at predicting individual responses.
Because everyone's body is slightly different.
Exactly. And that's where deep learning comes in. They use a type of neural network called generative adversarial networks, or GANs.
GANs. What are those?
Think of them as two AI systems that are constantly battling each other. One tries to create realistic-looking data, and the other tries to spot the fakes. And through this back and forth, they both get better and better.
So it's like they're training each other to be more accurate.
Exactly. And in this case, they used JANS to learn the differences between the physiological model's predictions and the actual glucose data from real patients.
So they're basically personalizing the model, making it more accurate for each individual.
Exactly. And they called this personalized model a time-varying virtual image of the patient's glucose metabolism.
Okay, so what kind of data did they use to train this digital twin?
They used data from a study called the Type 1 Diabetes and Exercise Initiative, or D1-DAXI. It involved 333 people with type 1 diabetes who were using insulin pumps and continuous glucose monitors.
So real-world data from people actually managing their diabetes.
Yeah, exactly. And crucially, these participants were also actively exercising and tracking their food intake, so it was a really rich and detailed data set.
And did they see any improvements in the accuracy of glucose predictions?
They did. Their digital twin was able to reduce the mean absolute error compared to a standard population-based model.
So it was better at predicting what a person's blood sugar would be in the near future.
Exactly. And that's really important for things like automated insulin delivery systems.
Right, the more accurate those systems are, the better they can keep people's blood sugar levels stable.
Exactly. And that's what they're working towards. They want to use these digital twins to test and refine control algorithms for those systems, all in a virtual environment.
So they can basically simulate different scenarios and see how the system would respond.
Exactly. It's like a virtual testing ground. And they also want to develop decision support systems that can help people make better decisions about their diabetes management.
So not just for insulin pumps, but for people managing their diabetes in other ways too.
Right. And they imagine a future where, you start using a continuous glucose monitor and your data gets fed into your personalized digital twin. And then that digital twin can help calibrate your treatment plan, make suggestions, and just generally guide you along the way.
Wow, it's like having a virtual diabetes coach.
Exactly. And it's all based on your unique data and your body's specific responses.
Now let's bring it back to this food as medicine concept. How do digital twins fit into that whole picture?
Well, the food as medicine movement is all about recognizing the power of nutrition to impact health. And it's about making sure that nutrition is integrated into healthcare.
Right, not just treating symptoms, but addressing the root causes.
Exactly. And digital twins could be a huge asset in this effort because they can track how your blood sugar responds to different foods and meals. They can give you really personalized dietary recommendations.
So it's not just about general guidelines anymore. It's about tailoring your diet to your unique metabolic profile.
Precisely. And the digital twin can also track the impact of those dietary changes over time so you can see how they're affecting your overall health.
That's like having a feedback loop, constantly adjusting and optimizing your diet.
Exactly. And that could make the whole food as medicine approach much more effective and scalable.
So it seems like there's this common thread running through all of our sources today.
Definitely. It's all about personalization and prediction.
Moving away from those one-size-fits-all recommendations and towards a much more individualized approach to healthcare.
Exactly. And digital twins are at the forefront of this revolution.
So as we wrap up our deep dive today, what are the key takeaways that we should leave with?
Okay, so first, it's clear that digital twins are no longer just a futuristic concept. They're actively being researched and developed, especially for diabetes management.
Right, and we've seen how they can be applied to both type 1 and type 2 diabetes.
Exactly. Second, these digital twins rely on collecting a ton of data from different sources, wearables, apps, medical records, and then they use sophisticated models combining our knowledge of physiology with the power of AI to make sense of all that data.
And we saw in Pain Study how valuable that real-world data can be, especially when you're looking at individual responses to things like diet and exercise.
Absolutely. Third, knowledge graphs seem to be a really promising way to structure all that data and make it usable for the digital twin.
Right, like creating a central hub for all your health information.
Exactly. Fourth, the work being done on digital twins for type 1 diabetes is super exciting. I mean, the idea of personalized automated insulin delivery systems is a game changer.
And the potential to test and refine those systems in a virtual environment could really accelerate progress.
Absolutely. Fifth, digital twins could be a real catalyst for the food as medicine movement, making personalized nutrition a reality for more people.
Right, tailoring diet plans to individual metabolic needs.
Exactly. And finally, I think the biggest takeaway is that we're moving towards a future where healthcare is much more personalized and proactive.
Instead of just reacting to problems, we'll be able to anticipate them and prevent them.
Precisely. And that's a future I'm really excited about.
So, for our listeners who are interested in learning more about this, where would you point them?
Definitely check out the research papers we talked about today. The authors' names are Mosquera Lopez and Jacobs, Pai and his team, and Sarani Rad and her colleagues.
You can find those online, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just search for their names and the titles of the papers, and also look into the broader fields of digital health and personalized medicine. There's so much happening in those areas right now.
And for those interested in the nutrition aspect, the food as medicine movement is a great place to start.
Definitely. There are tons of resources and organizations working on that.
All right, well, this has been an incredible deep dive. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
My pleasure. It's always fun to talk about the future of healthcare.
And thanks everyone for listening. We'll catch you on our next deep dive.
Ta-da!